listening today. So the schedule for today's event is as follows. So the first team presenting will be E3 Consulting, followed by Bumble Bee Advisory, DAPR Consulting, Team DN, Team Forever Grande, and then we'll conclude with the award presentation at 4:30. So all teams should be present at the award presentation and concluding remarks. So before we get started, there are a few general reminders I would like to make. So everyone is welcome to watch all the teams' presentations. To the finalists presenting, please ensure that you're present 5 minutes prior to your allocated session. You'll receive 10 minutes for presentation and another 10 minutes for the Q&A session. So during the presentation, you'll be given a warning at 9 and 10 minutes through the chat, and at 10 minutes and 30 seconds, you'll be asked to finish your sentence and please stop there. For everyone else, please mute yourself while you're not presenting. Okay, so the project brief for the case competition, is all about a $1 billion public investment in the Snowy Mountains, and all the teams are asked to address the question, which infrastructure projects would be most feasible for the Snowy Mountains SAP from a commercial, environmental, and social perspective? So our partner, Rishav from E3, who will introduce E3 Advisory.
So thanks, Jennifer. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate all the teams who have made it to the final round. You guys have all done an excellent job, and we're quite surprised from the responses we received, considering that everyone's been studying, everyone's been doing uni, and on top of that, they're doing this extracurricular activity. So we'd like to congratulate you all. So let's go to the next slide. We'll start introducing the judges that are, I think, all here on call now. So Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Avi. Michael Moore's my name, principal at E3. As noted there, I've been in industry for over 30 years with a construction background on some major projects across the Eastern Seaboard. And since 2008, been crossed over to consulting with Evans and Pack and now with E3 Advisory, working primarily in road sector and roads and tunnel projects. Thanks, Avi.
Well, good. Thanks, Mike, for that. We'll go over to the next slide. Satina's on the call with us as well. She's dialing in from Hong Kong. There you go.
Hi, everyone. First of all, congrats. This is exciting to be in the final. I'm looking forward to all your presentation today. So my name is Satina Zhang. I'm one of the principals in E3 Advisory. I started my consulting careers with Evans and Pack, and was there probably about 12 years before I become a founding member of E3 Advisory. It's really exciting to see the company grow into where we are now today for the last 7 years. My areas of specialties is more on the transaction management, procurement, and commercial. So overall, I think I spent a fair bit of time in the transport sector, mainly working on the rail, particularly. My also strong interest would be in more technology-driven sort of infrastructure project. Look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Satina. Yep, so next we have Derek. Derek, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Avi. And welcome everybody to this afternoon session. Thanks very much for your time. I've been with E3 since pretty much the beginning. My background, again, a bit like Satina's, in sort of civil infrastructure. I came by the way of mining and then environmental consulting before I started sort of, I guess, getting into the more strategic advisory side of the business. I spent a lot of time at the front end of projects. But more importantly, I also spent a fair bit of time down around Jindabyne and the Snowy Mountains. So I'm really interested to see what you're going to do to get more of us down there.
Thanks, Derek. Yep, so that leaves us with Andy Allen. So Andy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Avi. Hi, everyone. My name's Andy Allen. So I'm also principal with E3, and I was one of the founding principals with Satina. I started my started my career as an academic assistant. I was actually one of my first jobs was as an academic assistant at University of New South Wales. I joined actually Evans and Peck as a consultant, and I worked there for about 2 or 3 years before moving to the UK, where I worked in construction for a period of 5 years, and then came back to Australia, where I've spent most of my time on rail projects, probably all the big rail projects in Australia. More recently, working on Sydney Metro, where I did a number of roles, but including the transaction director role for the Sydney Southwest project, and also have a particular interest in cost advisory, where sort of established and have somewhat led the cost advisory development in E3 over the last 5 years or so. So yeah, looking forward very much to your presentation this afternoon, and we'll talk more then.
Thanks, Andy. We'll hand it back to you, Jen.
Yeah, great. So thank you for introducing all the judges. I'm really excited. So now we're going to start with our first case competition with ECC Consulting. So I will stop sharing now, and whoever's on the team is welcome to start screen sharing.
Yep. So whenever you guys are ready, we'll start off with introducing yourselves. Let us know about how you found the project and what you've been up to.
Yep. I can start. My name is Sanne. I think we found this project very different from other case competitions. It was really quite interesting, especially because the Snowy Mountains precinct, it's like the master plan's already so extensive, and it involves everything basically. So it was a little bit challenging trying to come up with something also innovative, but that was still feasible. So yeah, it was definitely a challenge, but it was really enjoyable as well.
Yeah, my name is Jason. I'm a third year studying civil engineering with architecture. And yeah, definitely I agree with Sanne in terms of like trying to find that innovative factor that was different to what was already in the strategy that was developed by the government already. But yeah.
Yeah, my name is Max. So I'm a second year civil engineering commerce, and I'd say, yeah, I think my teammates have pretty much said the project was very interesting and definitely challenging in parts.
Yeah, my name is Kelvin. This project is very close to my heart. I've been skiing since I was 5 years old, so I've pretty much gone to Threadboat every year except last year and this year for obvious reasons. So it's fantastic to be able to work on a project for the Snowy Mountains and to revisit some of the places that I've been in the past and hopefully try to make it a little bit better. So I will be responsible for the financials and feasibilities for this project. Cool, we'll get started with the presentations, and we're happy to take any questions during the presentation, but there will be time for Q&A at the end if you would like to reserve your questions for then as well.
Excellent. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. We are ECC Consulting, here to present our recommendations for the Snowy Mountains Special Activation Precinct. So I'm Max, and I will take us through the introduction and analysis sections, and then my team will take us through our recommendations, the implementation, financials, and risk mitigations. So the current situation is driven by reduced tourism revenue. An over-reliance on winter tourism combined with increased congestion and poor public transport has created a really high demand for economic development. We must optimize the usage of $1 billion to grow tourism through the development and upgrading of sustainable infrastructure, whilst leaving potential for $5 billion of private investments. Our solution is split into 3 parts. Firstly, attracting new tourists through Jindabyne's Winter Wonderland. Next, the Jindabyne Loop will provide new and accessible lakeside recreation whilst reducing town congestion. And lastly, electric shuttle buses will mobilize the local community and tourists alike. Through these recommendations, we project an increase of $500 million a year in local tourism and 49% more tourists, whilst all energy associated with our recommendations is 100% renewably sourced. As such, this directly addresses the UN Sustainable Development Goals of 7, 8, and 11. So the Snowy Mountains economy has recently suffered. A heavy reliance on the steadily declining winter tourist season combined with lockdowns has created a necessity for economic growth. Hence, the region is now a special activation precinct looking to increase economic development, create jobs, and benefit the wider community. To maximize the solution's impact, it is vital to select a target industry. Tourism is the biggest industry in the Snowy Mountains with 20% GRP and 16% employment. Hence, it is a core part of the community with area for growth across all seasons and will be the focus of our presentation today. According to locals, to promote tourism, there are 3 key considerations. These are developing infrastructure for summer tourism, reducing congestion on roads alongside a dependable transport network, and improving lake accessibility. The solutions to these are Jindabyne's Winter Wonderland, an indoor skiing facility with accompanying retail and hospitality. The Jindabyne Loop, bypassing the town centre roads whilst opening up Jindabyne Lake, and a network of EV shuttle buses to mobilise the community. And I'll pass on to Jason to go through our recommendations.
The first of our 3 recommendations is Jindabyne's new Winter Wonderland. And there are 4 key reasons why we have chosen to recommend an indoor ski park. Firstly, snow sports and snow tourism is the largest industry in the region. The demand for domestic skiing is set to increase for many years to come due to restrictions and reduced consumer confidence in overseas travel. We aim to meet these needs by including 250-meter slopes open in all seasons of the year, with slopes that are inclusive for everyone in the market, including dedicated coaching slopes, entry-level competitions for enthusiasts, as well as training facilities for winter sport athletes in the summer. Secondly, the market demand for accommodation is very high, with average length of stay for any visitor at 3.4 nights. We will accommodate this demand through an affordable 4-star 200-room hotel that faces Lake Jindabyne, including restaurants, hospitality, and retail facilities. Thirdly, there is a demand for snow experience in Australia, with 1 in 3 Aussies wanting to experience the snow, but not necessarily to ski. This snow park will offer New South Wales' first white Christmas snow theme park, packed with seasonal events for both winter and the summer. Lastly, this precinct will be fully powered by rooftop solar with enough battery storage capacity to power the building for more than 5 days.
The second part of our solution is the Jindabyne Loop. The aim of this is to ease the seasonal and peak hour congestion, as well as meeting the community needs by developing an accessible recreational foreshore. This loop provides a new road around the back of Jindabyne, bypassing the town centre and providing easy access to our new Winter Wonderland. It will significantly reduce travel time for those who are looking to not stop in Jindabyne and will ease congestion within the town centre. The recreational area will show off native plants, footpaths, cycle paths, and opportunities for local markets, as well as playgrounds and outdoor gyms to address the community needs. Sky bridges will also provide a safe walkway to access the recreational foreshore and allow traffic to continue to move within the town centre. This loop will help create an improved sense of community, accessibility, and enhance the natural landscape around Jindabyne. Finally, we will implement an improved public bus transport system. This new system is future ready and it uses EV buses that are fully powered by renewable energy and will significantly reduce carbon emissions in the area. These buses will be powered using the local Snowy Hydro, a sustainable hydroelectricity irrigation complex located deep within the Snowy Mountains. This new system will have improved frequencies running approximately every 20 minutes and will stop at a wide range of key areas such as Jindabyne, East Jindabyne, Thredbo and Perisher, and local streets and residential areas. This new system will be able to provide an increased flexibility and reliability over the current bus system, which is a key issue in peak tourist times.
So the Snowy Mountain upgrades will be achieved through 3 key phases. Phase 1, starting from 2022, involves releasing tenders for the 3 major upgrades for our design, for the construction, design, and operations of our project. During this period, we will also be obtaining construction certificates from the state and approvals from the state while undergoing negotiations for EV bus providers. Phase 2 will see the commencement of construction for the new road corridor and the ski park. Lake Jindabyne foreshores will also be refurbished, while an expression of interest is gathered from private investors. The regional trials for EV buses is set to commence in 2029. Finally, Phase 3 will see the full operation of our upgrades, with the ski park welcoming its first season of customers. The successes of our project will attract private investment on further upgrades, such as on the shore hotel and lake accommodations, and also sponsorship for the Monero Ngarigo Art Gallery and museums. This will bring about and encourage diversity within the Snowy Mountains community. Our strategy is also backed by strong financial returns. although the upfront cost is quite demanding, standing at $966 million, split between phases 1 and 2, with emphasis on phase 1. The majority of the capital expenditure stems from the winter wonderland. Our team has also accounted for 2.5% inflation over the next 10 years construction period, and an additional 15% accounted for the regional premium at the Snowy Mountains. Our sensitivity analysis accounts for ample financial risks, with the worst case scenario being 5% over the budget that we currently have. Finally, this investment will result in a 14% increase in trips made to the Snowy Mountains, with the majority being an increase in trips taken in the summer. A $208 million incremental revenue increase for the region will also realize a 12-year payback period at a 35% profit margin, rendering the project a financially worthwhile investment. Additionally, we have also prepared risk mitigation strategies for this project. Construction delays rank the highest in terms of frequency, yet with flexibility built into our agile project management plan, we render this risk at low severity. Furthermore, we aim to focus on community benefits through resolving disputes with the community by holding council assemblies to gather community feedback. Thirdly, a lack of private investment can be avoided by undertaking public-private partnerships for further development opportunities, and also subsidized developments within the Snowy Mountain SAP. And lastly, the failure to reach targeted tourism growth can be mitigated through undertaking marketing, rebranding campaigns, and launching tourism incentives. Overall, we hope to significantly decrease the likelihood and severity of the risks.
In terms of commercial impact, our precinct will uplift tourism revenue by $500 million yearly. This will create 2,000 local jobs, bringing in private businesses such as ski services, tourism services, as well as retail stores. Secondly, our roads and transport upgrades will reduce seasonal congestion by 15% and transform the ways both locals and visitors connect with Jindabyne. Lastly, our design will minimize environmental impacts through renewables technology with a 15% reduced carbon footprint for all visitors. In doing so, we aim to revolutionize sustainable precincts through Jindabyne's world-class facilities and ensuring Jindabyne is best positioned to maximize the future economic potential. Thank you for listening, and we'll now open the floor for a Q&A session with the judges.
Thanks, ECC Consulting. That's some very good work you guys have done. Would one of the judges like to start asking any of the questions? Or would you like me to start? Yeah.
I'll kick off. Thanks very much for that presentation. There's some interesting ideas in there. Certainly, I do like the idea around that access road and opening up the lake. I think that's a really good idea. But obviously, all the money's in the snow centre, so let's focus on the snow centre. So you're talking about, if you consider phase 1 and phase 2, pretty close to the $1 billion, call it $900 million worth of investment going into this snow centre. I'm trying to figure out, and I think what you're suggesting is that snow centre is going to be tendered out by the New South Wales government. So that's a New South Wales government initiative. Is that correct?
Yes. So we were working on $1 billion available capital for this project. That was given by the case brief. So I assumed that the case brief meant that the government would be able to supply this $1 billion investment. So yes,
if we look at the phase 1 and phase 2, 368, 484 million, let's just call it $9 million. So if I just kind of think about it and go, how much are people willing to pay to go to one of these centres? You're talking about, I don't know, maybe $50 a ticket. You're talking about requiring about $2 million, 2 million people over the course of a year in order to make that kind of start to break even and pay back capital investment. So that's somewhere between 30, 50,000 people a week. Have you sort of run the numbers and seen how that would work from an accommodation perspective, how that would work from the actual ability of the town to deal with that? That looks like a lot of people that would be required to come in order to make that work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would just first like to clarify the phases 1 and 2 is talking about the construction phases of this project. So phase 1 mainly considers the design and the tender processes of our particular solutions, while phase 2 focuses on the construction of our solutions. I'll let Jason take you through the revenue model that we have.
Yeah, for sure. Max, if you could just go to the appendix slide again. Should be in financial model 1, yeah. So essentially this is our revenue model. So in terms of the summer season in the hotel, firstly, with our hotel capacity being 200, and we assumed the average occupancy rate across the year will be 85%. And average accommodation and living cost per room, we estimated to be around $300. And that with those numbers, we calculated how much revenue we can gain per night on average. And from there, we have calculated revenue per year from the hotel. And that very similarly with the winter section, that's what we have done with average occupancy rate at 90%, as the winter season would be a more popular season. And summing that up, so 9.3 million and 9.8 million would be our total revenue from our hotel. Secondly, in terms of ski park, taking the case study from Ski Dubai, which has a ski park capacity of 1,500 people. And since our ski park is a larger venue, we have increased that capacity to 1.8. And with that, we have expected the average occupancy rate per hour to be 0.80%. And with number of hours open at 12 hours, multiplied that by average ski park cost per hour, that's based on ticket rates. We've actually made a conservative approach for this one because we want to initially attract more people with lower costs. And in multiplying those 4 numbers, we have estimated 189 million per year, multiplying that by 365 days as well.
So if I look at those numbers, so you've got a ski park capacity of 1,800,
yeah,
and a number of hours open 12. You go through all those. Just being, if you sort of go ultra conservative, you're talking about 15,000 people per day through the ski park, which gives you sort of that revenue.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
How many hotel rooms are in Jindabyne? Are there enough hotel rooms in Jindabyne to cater for 15,000 people day in, day out?
Yeah, I believe so. Currently, well, frankly, about 30 to 50% of the houses in Jindabyne are being rented out as accommodation, especially during the winter period. And Jindabyne as a town actually thrives on those renting those houses out as accommodation because it's a tourist town and there's a huge influx of number of tourists, especially throughout the winter. So we believe 1,500 people or even 2,000 people for the ski park is a reasonable number. Additionally, we do have our own hotel with 200 rooms, which can accommodate for up to 400 to 500 people. So we will also be able to offset that number of people coming through Jindabyne with our own hotel.
Okay, fantastic. I probably asked enough questions, so I'll open it up for anybody else to ask any questions. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, Andy, Mike, Satina, are there any other questions that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. So if, in terms of the investment in the ski park, if that, I guess from what your numbers there stacks up in Jindabyne, what's there stopping someone from building a ski park, let's say in Sydney, and possibly taking away some of the demand for people to travel to Jindabyne to access the facility? Is there something about Jindabyne that might make it more attractive?
Yeah, for sure. Max, could you please navigate to the seasonal planning for Winter Wonderland, slide 30? Yeah, 29, yeah. So about Jindabyne, beyond the services that are provided, the existing services such as the mountain biking facilities, or even just the snowy mountains, threadbow facilities, those attractions will initially bring those people into Jindabyne area, but we also offer those additional services such as ski coaching services and daycare services that people might want to use while being in Jindabyne. So we mainly want to target the people who already comes to Jindabyne for that genuine, authentic ski experience, as well as people who come to Jindabyne for the summer season experience, such as mountain biking or rock climbing and things like that. So we don't really expect to bring in new people, but more about targeting that existing market, as well as bringing value to attracting more people to come through the snow park experience, as well as the theme park as well.
Yeah, I would just like to highlight that Jindabyne at the moment as a town is known for its activities, whether that's skiing in the winter, which is it's more famously known for, but it's also known for a place to do a lot of mountain biking, bushwalking and camping in the summer. So we already have this huge customer base, or about 2.2 million people visiting Jindabyne per year, pre-COVID, that is. So we already have this huge customer base, and we just want to build up on this customer base. The ski park is targeted for winter and summer tourists at the moment, because there's a lot of summer tourists going through to Jindabyne to do all this bushwalking and mountain biking. So this is another opportunity for them to try something out and to do something other than bushwalking and mountain biking. So we do believe that with the size of our ski park being the biggest in the Southern Hemisphere, and which can also rival the Dubai ski park, we believe that it will contribute to the image of Jindabyne being a resort for activities, and that will attract more people to Jindabyne, even in the summer as well.
Also in your presentation, you mentioned it being constructed in 2 phases. What was the I guess the principles or the benefit of doing it in 2 phases?
It will not necessarily be constructed in 2 phases, but the first phase mainly involves the tender and the design of the project, with the second phase being mostly focused on the construction.
I thought there was sort of 2 phases of expenditure. Was that, yeah, it's phase 1 and phase 2 expenditure. So you don't get any of the benefits until the completion of phase 2, is that correct? Or from what you're just saying, the first phase is really around the design and early works?
Yeah, that's correct.
Do you think there might be sorry?
Sorry, we can't really operate the ski park without it being 100% completed. So
I guess the question might be then, do you think there might be possibilities to bring forward the opening of the ski park, or ways to get benefits earlier than the full construction period?
Yeah, a way we can do that is focus on the ski park in itself first, and then focus on the accommodation, such as the hotel. We do have 3 solutions here available to upgrade Jindabyne as a town. We can focus on one particular solution, such as the ski park, to overall accelerate the possibility of opening it earlier. However, that would be at the expense of the Jindabyne Loop and also the EV shuttle buses. But it is something that can be done.
Maybe I might just jump in there with a question while Andy's having a think about that. Thanks, guys. I really think it's a great idea, very innovative. Really like the thinking behind it. You've clearly identified that there's a couple of key risks to your proposal, with most of your funding in the ski park being tourism growth and attracting private investment. Just wondering what your ideas or thoughts were around methods of attracting developers to invest in the area, particularly in the foreshore. And I think in your presentation, you referred to dwelling construction and perhaps land development opportunities. So, what was your thinking around methods of attracting the private investors, and have you considered stakeholder inputs along the way?
Yeah, so in terms of private investment, we have considered investment for the lake accommodation or such as on the shore hotels. This is because the investors will be able to capitalize on the ski park and also an influx of tourism by building hotels and potentially getting a financial return from those hotels. Secondly, we have looked at the Monero Ngarigo Art Gallery and Museum. So that's the local Aboriginal land. So this will be more of a sponsorship-based investment. So potentially a company would be able to sponsor this museum to able to increase their influences, especially in the Snowy Mountains precinct.
And just to add on from that as well, another big private investment opportunity is in the ski and tourism sector. So things like coaching services or even tourism services, because there'll be such a large ski park being developed that are open all year round. Those might be the private opportunities that we wish to attract.
In terms of stakeholders, we do see an opportunity for the partnership between the state and also the private sector to basically work together to increase the capabilities and the benefits and the services at Jindabyne available to those tourists. We also envision a potential impact for the local community because we're conducting so much development. However, as we have mentioned in the risk and mitigation, we do plan to gather community feedback and try to resolve those disputes if they arise.
Yeah, Mike, is there any other questions that you'd like to ask? Also, Tina?
Thanks for that.
I guess that's it from our judges. Are there any questions that Team ECC would like to ask our judges?
Not at the moment, but thank you so much for your questions and your time. And it's great to present to someone with so much expertise in the field.
All good, Kelvin. You guys have done an excellent job. Yeah.
Actually, I just wanted to ask if there was some time left as well for us. Just for Andy, I think, did we answer your question properly, or did you want us to go further into anything?
Which question you mean in relation to the staging, or
like whichever it was, because I felt like we didn't come to like a satisfactory answer.
No, I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I think that'd probably be something to explore going forward if it was to become real. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But thanks very much for your presentation. Some very good ideas there, I think. And I'm a fan of the area myself. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you all. So yes, could the judges please enter the breakout room, and we'll have a discussion about the progress so far.
Right. Do we want to do our introductions first, and then we can get into it?
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good. So we're Bumble Bee 3 Advisory, excuse me. My name's Christine. I'm a third year studying civil engineering and commerce.
Hello, I'm Brian. I'm in fourth year. I'm studying chemical engineering and chemistry.
Hey, my name's Kieran, and I'm in third year studying civil engineering and commerce.
Hi, my name's Rishav, and I'm in my third year studying chemical engineering.
All right, awesome. So let's get straight into it. So to briefly overview the agenda for today, we'll start off with an analysis of the key issues. This analysis then led us to the question of how can we improve the access, visitor experiences, and quality of life of both visitors and residents in the Snowy Mountain SAP in order to drive future growth. We'll then present our solution before outlining its key impacts. So if you've got any questions throughout, if you wouldn't mind just noting them down to ask at the end, please, just to maintain the flow of information and in case we answer your questions during our presentation as well. All right, so onto our problem breakdown. Our research into the key issues found that visitors to the Snowy SAP are projected to almost double in the next 40 years. Looking at the demographics of these visitors, the vast majority were domestic and often came from nearby cities. Most visitors also traveled around by car, which puts heavy strain on the main roads, particularly the Monero Highway and Kosciuszko Road. Imagine going on a holiday, super keen to head to the ski resorts, only to get stuck in hours worth of traffic. So from this, we concluded that travel infrastructure needs to improve in order to accommodate these higher volumes. Along with this, between 2015 to 2019, Gingerbine saw a 33% increase in domestic travellers and a 62% increase in international visitors. Post-COVID, this is a trend that will continue. So it's imperative that we ensure this growth is sustainable for Gingerbine. The key to this is year-round tourism. Our solution can be split into two categories. First one being tourism and second one being community infrastructure. To grow a year-round tourism economy, we must invest in supporting tourism infrastructure, optimize travel to and through the region, attract private investors, and utilize Gingerbine's assets like the waterfront. To accommodate this growth, Gingerbine will require improved social services, increased housing, an improved public transport system, and improved movement corridors. I'll pass it on to Kieran now to discuss the first phase of our solution.
Thank you, Christine. Now, let me ask a question for you all. What is the key to tourism growth? It's not the activities themselves, but rather the infrastructure that enables them, that allows for tourists to easily access the area and allows for private investors to easily buy into the region. To tackle the issue of lacking summertime tourism infrastructure, we aim to build a cultural hub on the waterfront to activate the area and open up potential for lakeside tourist activities. This initiative aims to mimic the successes of Queenstown, New Zealand's lakeside tourist hub. This space utilizes Gingerbine's pristine lake to attract interest from tourists and private investment alike. Following Queenstown's model to attract private investment, we will offer grants and subsidies to initial private investors. Did you know at the bottom of Lake Gingerbine is a sunken town? This is just one of many existing assets Gingerbine's tourism industry can leverage to attract visitors and promote summertime tourism. In the theme of utilizing assets, we plan to construct a campground and showground in the existing scenic landscape. To increase the ease of access to the region, additional road upgrades are planned to benefit the majority who travel by private vehicle. These upgrades are as follows: improved maintenance of drainage culverts to increase road safety, an installation of an additional overtaking lane between Breadbow and Cooma to improve travel times from Canberra. Outside of the town centre, Gingerbine has some under-maintained roads which can be resurfaced to improve safety. And finally, the predominant accidents are run-off road, and there's an opportunity to increase safety on the path to the ski resort by installing roadside barriers. Building on these upgrades, public transport options are defragmented with the opportunity to improve Canberra as a gateway to the SAP. Providing more bus and coach services will increase accessibility without excess emissions and congestion from cars. Now, please let me pass on to Rishav to discuss the second phase of our solution.
Thank you, Kieran. So in Gingerbine, large population fluctuations cause an oversupply of housing when it's needed the least and a critical undersupply when it's needed the most. Adding to this, outside investors buying holiday homes has caused inflation in housing prices. That's why roughly 35% of our budget is allocated to an additional 2,700 dwellings to provide affordable housing with subsidies for residents. Social services can also be majorly improved. The nearest healthcare and aged care facilities are a 40-minute drive away. Our solution proposes a new 40-bed hospital to supplement the existing health centers in Gingerbine. A new TAFE learning center and a library are also proposed for the continued upskilling and further education of residents, since most residents' highest education level currently is high school. Utilities are also an important piece of infrastructure that needs improvements. The existing Gingerbine wastewater plant suffers various issues, which includes aging equipment and insufficient capacity to support peak load, to name a few. To address these, our solution includes capacity expansion and the automation of operations to ensure consistent effluent quality. With regards to telecommunications as well, there's a number of network issues and the government's existing funding isn't enough to fix them. Therefore, we suggest 5 new mobile base stations to increase network coverage. All of these proposed initiatives will improve the region's compliance to a number of UN SDGs as well, including Goal 3, Good Health and Wellbeing, Goal 4, Quality Education, and Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. The proposed residential expansion, healthcare, and TAFE projects will improve access to social services. The telecom network upgrades will improve backcountry navigation and also improve the emergency response services within the region. This, combined with the proposed upgrades to wastewater systems that I mentioned, will build resilience for the future. Our solution also promotes environmentally conscious and sustainable development through the use of sustainable construction materials that are cost-effective as well as environmentally friendly. I'll now pass it on to Brian.
Thanks, Rishav. So following on from our qualitative impacts, I'll continue with what you're probably all thinking about, the money. So our proposal incurs a total capital cost of $880 million, with the majority going towards improving the livability of the city. Since urban development is the highest capital investment with $330 million, and then adding on the utilities and social services needed to support the population, this sums to about 50% of our allocated capital. And with more people living and visiting the town, there's a lot of room for private investors to also make some money, particularly in property development. There's around 1.25 billion in affordable urban housing and premium waterfront development, and with more in tourism and utilities. We've also included in our capital a $260 million fund for contingency and grants to support sustainable or innovative private projects. And currently, visitors bring over $800 million a year to the region, which is projected to reach 1.3 billion by 2050. Accounting for our operating costs and increased visitor spending, we do expect negative cash flows until 2038, but this is justified by our social benefits and the long-term economic growth with a project NPV of $1.4 billion. And from our risk assessment, the first major risk is in the sourcing of materials. Supply chain uncertainty can be a problem in regional areas, so we need to diversify our freight routes and stagger our development times. On top of increased population growth, our developments will also increase energy demands. However, the existing upgrade plans for the Snowy Hydro plant are expected to sustain these needs. And lastly, there is a risk of environmental damage. So prior to implementation, an environmental impact assessment should be conducted with a carbon offset strategy. So to conclude, our proposal enables year-round economic activity through resilient infrastructure. By improving mobility to the region, visitor experiences, and quality of life of the visitors and the residents, future growth in the Snowy Mountains can be accelerated. Thank you for listening. We're now open to questions.
Thanks, Bumble Bee 3. Nice name there. Trying to, might have to. Well, good.
Did you see what we did there?
You like
Yeah, of course we did. We might have to sue you. That's great. But well, good. Let's start with questions. We'll start it off. We've got Andy and Derek already got the cameras up. I'm quite keen.
You want to go first, Andy?
Yeah, okay. I'll ask a question. So one of your components was to build a new wharf around Lake Jindabyne. Lake Jindabyine's a storage dam for the hydro scheme, so it has like quite considerable changes in water levels. Did you think whether it's possible to build a wharf or how you go about that, perhaps?
Yeah, so I think the only, wharf part of it that would be within the water is the jetty that would come out that will allow boats to access the pier. And across Australia, there's technology that's been developed that allows piers to rise and fall with the changing tide. And we don't believe that the water level will change so significantly that would impact that part of the wharf. The surrounding wharf along the waterline would actually be a part on the land, and we built up walkway that will allow people to walk around the water and kind of get close to it and access it.
Okay, excellent, thanks. Another question then, in terms of the calculation of the benefits, can you talk through that a bit further as well in a bit more detail?
So are you talking about the financials?
Yeah, the financials, yeah.
Okay, so what we did was we looked at the visitor revenue as it was currently, 801 million. The previous growth rate from 2018 to 2019 was 0.5% year on year. And then with the Snowy SAP master plan, they projected a growth rate of an increase of 1.16 year on year. So we just factored that in. And the financial benefits that we talked about in our model is only the increased visitor revenue. So that's taking the difference between the previous growth rate and then the accelerated growth rate. However, we didn't quantify the other additional benefits, so like increased jobs and the more qualitative stuff like the social services.
Okay. So it's really just the increased visitor revenue, right?
So what we the only thing we accounted for was the increased visitor revenue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in?
Yeah,
Andy?
jump in, Derek. Yep, go for it.
Yeah, thanks. This is a really good presentation to all of you. Yeah, road upgrade. Love road upgrades. They're exceptionally boring, but really, really good. And you certainly picked a few roads there that needed to be upgraded, and you're absolutely right. Making them safer and making them easier to get to and from the region is exceptionally important. I've got a couple of questions on it. You talked about the 2,700 houses. Now, I think from what I was hearing is that those would be delivered by the government. Is that correct?
So what I proposed was that the government was mainly responsible for the land development to ensure that it's feasible for developers to then construct on top of that.
And where would these 2,700, because you were talking about these for basically low income social housing. I think those were a couple of the words that I heard utilised. I suspect essentially for long-term residents and the people that are actually sort of working within the tourism sector to allow them access to that housing. Where would those houses be?
Yeah, so we thought that I'll just use maybe this map because it's a bit better. So there's already like more premium property in either Lakeside and East Jindabyne, but we think that down in the southwest area, there's a lot more space that can be built up. It also has access to the road, to the main road Barryway. So there's already existing connectivity to the town centre.
Okay, and if we can go back to your, before I go into that one, you also talked about base station upgrade. Now again, were you talking about that as a government area, the upgrading of all the base stations? Or was that something that you're looking at the private to get involved in?
Yeah, so the model around that is based on the current government's mobile black spot program. So we found a lot of research that showed us that the current existing funding isn't enough to actually assist the private sector in implementing more telecommunications infrastructure in the rural regions. So based on that, we'll be modeling off a similar implementation process. So we'll be investing a bit of funding for the private sector to get them started, and then they'll do another portion of that as well to continue building that up as well.
So what is that? Is the black spot funding something that the federal government invests, basically pays the telcos to put base stations in, is it?
Yeah, exactly. So they invest a portion of the money, and then because Telstra and all those providers, they also invest quite a bit of money into rural areas as well. So it's kind of like almost like a public-private partnership sort of thing coming together.
No, that's fantastic. If you can go back like a few slides on. So, I mean, you've identified a few things which kind of help to, they're kind of, what's the right word? Hygiene factors. So upgrading the road, upgrading the sewage treatment plant, upgrading the telco. None of those things in themselves are going to get, none of those things are going to excite huge investment into the area. So essentially your big one, you sat in on the last presentation. So you're equivalent to the big shiny ski centre is a wharf. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So our main innovation is Did you want to
continue?
Talk
me through how the wharf itself, you building a wharf, is going to get people excited into this area.
Kieran, do you want to start off on this?
Yeah. So our strategy was, rather than we are, as the government, actually building the tourist activities, we want to give space for the private sector to invest their money. That's how we thought we would make up our 5 billion. So rather, this wharf is kind of extending the town centre down to the waterfront, and we've left room for the private sector to come in and benefit from that. So it's following the model that's seen in Queenstown, which is essentially the same as Jindabyne in terms of being it's a tourist hub. During the winter, it's a ski town, and during the summer, they have a lot of summertime tourist activity that gets people coming there. And we, as the government, don't have enough funding to build up all those things, but rather we thought it would be better to invest our money in the infrastructure that allows people to live there. And so then the private sector can come in. And so for us to entice the private sector to come and invest, initially we have grants and subsidies. So that is how we will get the private sector in. And we've just given them room and a nice area to set up in and eventually expand.
So if you just flick back to that other slide, so what's the developable area? What are we talking about from a size? How many hectares? How many thousands of square meters? How many property
It's
lots?
around, the wharf itself is only 25,000 square meters, I believe.
And all these sort of yellow areas and green areas, which is, I presume, where you're really looking at getting people in. So what are we talking about here?
Yeah. So
where's the property developer here? What's my net lettable area and stuff?
I think for this section, we didn't go into as much detail in terms of the property, exactly what the property would be used for, but we did come up with a few sort of innovative ideas. If we head off to the digital placemaking app appendices, Brian. So in terms of ideas for the area and how that might be used by the private investors, we sort of took, we kind of increased the scope from infrastructure to also adding in, for example, digital placemaking app for the area which we used, and for tourists to leverage off that and using that. So the private investors will be coming in, creating this app so that the tourists can use that, and it will really build the area into something that's more sellable. So it's not just this infrastructure, these empty lots. We've got this sort of marketing campaign, Conquer Kosciuszko, around the area as well to really drive investors into the area. And like you mentioned, those road upgrades as well. There isn't much private investment from that because it'll mostly be government funded in that area. But through that, we can use that and leverage off that to sell to the private investors to come into the region and really develop those areas, those lots that we had there shown before. Does that kind of answer your question?
It does. That's a really good answer, guys. Thanks very much.
Awesome.
Yep, let's take the last few questions before we go off and do a bit of marketing. Mike,
I'll just jump in there, Avi. Got a question. It's around the tourism growth. I think you said tourism growth is expected to double at the beginning of your prezi.
Yeah, this one.
So is it that, I'm not sure where that data comes from.
Oh, this one was from the
is the development a response to that growth in tourism, or is the tourism a product of the proposed development in Jindabyne? And a second part of my question is, and it's back to the 2,700 dwellings, how you determined that was the right number of dwellings required for your proposal.
Okay, so to answer your first question, this visitor increase was in the SAP master plan, and then in terms of whether it's tourism growth or visitor growth, I think it's a bit of both, because the visitor growth needs something else to. They need a reason to come, right? And we wanted not just ski season activities. We wanted to lower the peak between the ski season and then the summer season. So most of that extra visitors would be raising up that summer activity. And then with the housing, I think it was this. So I looked at the census data in 2016. The population was about 7,000. The number of dwellings was 4,700, and then of those that were occupied by the residents was about 2,400. I sort of wanted to maintain that ratio, but increase it by a bit for our plan. So that's why the occupied dwellings population ratio went up a bit. And then I just pulled through those numbers to say that we needed an additional 2,700 dwellings. Essentially, it was just based off the population growth and the ratio of occupied dwellings to that.
And the $100,000 per dwelling, that's the infrastructure cost for land development, is it?
Yes, yes. And that was based off, I found this piece of literature which looked at comparative infrastructure development in Australia for Victoria. I assumed it was going to be similar for a regional area in New South Wales. And then I picked out the settings that I thought were applicable to our situation. So like things like infields and greenfield development, as well as large-scale brownfields for the more established places in Jindabyne. And an average of all of that gave me about 100,000 per dwelling.
Yep, very good.
Yeah,
and I really like your presentation. Thank you. I like the fact that you've got a tourism solution and a livability solution addressing the local community as well as the tourists. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Satina, do you have a question as well? Satina, I think you're muted.
Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So I think I tried to understand the time frame. I mean, it looks like you have a lot of good ideas and initiatives there. When you actually start doing the cash flow, I think you have a slide on that. That sort of give me indication of somehow you see the project will be delivered over a period of time. Could you just give us a quick summary of the rationale or logics that you have in terms of the priority of the initiative? Maybe looking into the potential impact on the actual locally during the construction phase. So yeah, I think that is the slides you have on this one, because I didn't see a delivery time frame as such, but I'm sort of trying to interpret it from this slide.
So the way I did it, I tried to simplify it as much as possible by putting everything as front loaded as I could. But I did identify that the main things that needed to complete quicker were things like roads and the bus service. Roads, because I think that a lot of our later projects will require a lot more freight to and from the region. So then this road upgrade will support that. I put the housing development spread out over the first 10 years. I just put it evenly just to lower the upfront cost to the government. I think the wharf upgrade is the large portion can be conducted in the first year. So I just did like a 70-30 sort of split there, as well as the TAFE library and the hospital. And I chose 2 years for these just because a lot of the case studies that we looked at said they were complete within a couple of years.
Just to add on to that as well, I think generally the way we one of the risks we identified was based on like kind of supply, demand and matching both of those. So I guess the implementation is kind of spread throughout, particularly for the housing, in order to match the supply and demand as well within the region.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I guess thanks for your presentation, Bumble Bee 3. That was quite good. We will go into our breakout rooms now for the judges and we'll have a discussion. Just hold back and wait for the next presentation.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Sweet. Okay, so it looks like we have Team DAPR here. Is everyone ready to go?
Yep.
Yeah. So what's the time? 3:09.
Yeah. Cool.
We'll give it over to you guys. Let's go.
Yeah. Great to have the judges here today. I think we'll just begin with a quick self-introduction and we'll get straight into it.
Yep. So my name's Daniel. I'm a second year mechatronics and computer science student. And, I think I'm gonna just reiterate what the other two teams said. The case is like very interesting. I think it's like my first time doing a case where, innovate and use strategy. So we had to find a way to like synergize with the SAP that was given to us. yeah.
Hi, I'm Ava, and I'm a second year civil engineering student. And yeah, I agree with what Tanya said as well.
Cool. Oh, right. Sorry, I'm Patrick, third year studying civil and commerce. Yeah, I think the case was really pushed us to think innovatively and outside of the confines, I suppose, or like the guidelines of the SAP plan. And yeah, hope you like our solution, I suppose.
Yep. So I guess for me, yeah, I'm also a second year studying aerospace and material science. I think, yeah, this is the first time doing a civil case like this. So, but I think, yeah, I found the experience quite enjoyable. So, yeah.
Righto, I'll get started. We'll be happy to take questions throughout, but obviously as allocated question time at the end, we'll be happy to take the bulk of those there. And yeah, right, cool, get started. Jindabyne, a town that has long since been New South Wales' gateway to alpine tourism. Traditionally, it's a stopover, somewhere where you might have had a meal or two, stayed a night, hired some equipment, not exactly a bustling hub of activity or people. But imagine for a second, if we harnessed all the local resources in a sustainable way, linking the economy, people, and environment to create a metropolis. That is exactly what we're proposing to you today. My name is Patrick, we are DAPR Consulting, and we present to you Project Aid, how we plan on putting Jindabyne back on the map. Historically, Jindabyne has been allocated the majority of its investments in tourism infrastructure, leaving much to be desired in the town space. We've created a strategy that revolves around enhancing social interactivity, eliminating the reliance on unsustainable transport and congestion, and restoring local job opportunities. Through closely analysing our problem statement, we've developed Project Aid, a three-pronged approach to capitalise on the opportunities in Jindabyne, to accommodate the switch to renewable and an emission-free future, to invest in new transport infrastructure, and to develop new employment opportunities for the local community. Our strategy will see a 34% increase in local workforce, a roadmap to achieve carbon neutrality by 2035, and a strategic $123 invested into transport infrastructure. Let's take a look at some of the key statistics of the Jindabyne region. With only 4,000 local residents and 700,000 annual visitors, tourism is a predominant driver to Jindabyne, with over 47 million in annual expenditure. We've closely examined the SAP master plan and elected to create a strategy in Jindabyne due to its possible synergies and opportunities, with much of the master plan focused on leveraging natural beauty and connectivity issues in Jindabyne. Some significant trends that have guided our analysis include Jindabyne's reliance on cars, with 94% of visitors opting for private transport, contributing to 55% of local emissions. Visitors are also expected to double to 1.4 million by 2060, with over 80% of these visitors coming in the winter months. Finally, Jindabyne is fortunate enough to be in close proximity to the Snowy Hydro and is capable of producing 128 gigawatt hours annually, with the renewable energy industry creating more jobs than fossil fuels. Now, what of the residents of Jindabyne? Well, life isn't easy for them, with occupancy shooting up 5 times in winter months, inflating housing prices. In recent reports, 32% of the community believe Jindabyne lacks the infrastructure it needs, with 27% believing Jindabyne needs new economic growth. Take Sarah, for example, a 42-year-old mother of 2. As a result of the huge seasonal fluctuations in population, housing prices have soared. As well as this, a lack of public transport and disjointed facilities means she needs to drive anywhere she wants to go. Finally, Sarah wants better opportunities for her children. All local employment disappears in the summer months along with the end of the ski season. All of this has led us to our problem statement. Given the current local and global trends, how can the Snowy Mountains SAP diversify its economy and provide new infrastructure to catalyze sustainable growth by 2035?
Our team has devised a holistic and feasible 3-part strategy that synergizes with Snowy Mountains SAP, which tackles root issues in Jindabyne to promote growth. I present to you Project Aid. The first part of Project Aid will help accommodate for an emission-free future by implementing a 10-year sustainability plan to reach carbon neutrality by 2035. Investing in a transport hub and eco-friendly infrastructure will provide a transportation network that connects Jindabyne's key precincts to the town centre. And finally, developing a Snowy Hydro R&D precinct and an exploration centre will increase the labour force and capital in Jindabyne. Accommodate, invest, develop. Investing in our strategy will ultimately aid Jindabyne. Starting off with accommodate. Our analysis shows that Jindabyne doesn't really rely on renewable sources year-round, which leads to the generation of excessive greenhouse gas emissions. Our proposal is to develop a carbon negative precinct by first establishing a power purchase agreement with Snowy Hydro. This allows Jindabyne to be at the forefront of sustainability, and renewable energy and become a nursery but for innovation, further contributing to the national target of reaching zero net emissions by 2050. Additionally, sustainable infrastructure and practices will be implemented. A 30 megawatt solar farm will be implemented in our commercial area, generating 45 gigawatt hours. This will add on to energy generated from our installed solar PV rooftop system, installed on private and public facilities. This can all be done feasibly and sustainably, as similar initiatives have been done in the Parks SAP as well as the AGL. Ultimately, implementing this initiative aligns with the UN's holistic goals, thus emphasizing that this initiative will aid in future-proofing Jindabyne's sustainability and energy needs. Currently, Jindabyne is a car-dependent society with almost 100% of visitors entering by private vehicles, which in turn generates excessive emissions, congestion, and unsafe roads. Coupled with major development zones all across the town in the master plan, we believe that the government should invest in the new transport hub that interconnects Jindabyne's key precincts. This will be an efficient way of reducing emissions and accelerating multimodal transport. Located at the heart of the town, the hub will include a charging depot, retrofitted with the fastest chargers already trialed in Sydney. A bus fleet of 40 will be sourced from state manufacturers such as Element buses. This transport system will be able to save 3,000 tons of CO2 annually. And by connecting the peripherals of the town to the center, people can communicate from Jindabyne to the Alpines in 80 minutes. As for the people who still use cars, we will accommodate future trends by installing EV charging stations at high density points. Ultimately, interconnecting Jindabyne using cleaner transport will aid the community in becoming a more social and safer place for people like Sarah.
Additionally, we recognize the importance of transitioning to renewable technologies and reliable employment opportunities in the town. That's why we believe the government should invest in a snowy hydro R&D precinct in East Jindabyne, consisting of a research centre and public exploration centre. First, the R&D centre will facilitate more training programs and research opportunities with a focus on alpine hydrology, hydrogen and solar, leveraging its proximity to the natural landscape. The Exploration Centre will facilitate more education programs and public information, attracting locals and visitors. The key benefits, of course, are more inclusive work opportunities with estimates of up to 800 new employment, the revival of the local economy, as these jobs will provide more reliable and higher incomes that are not as dependent on seasonal tourism, and lastly, contributing to the circular flow of the local economy. Ultimately, this partnership with Snowy Hydro will aid Jindabyne by providing more reliable and stable opportunities.
Following the aforementioned strategy, here is our implementation timeline. The construction of the bus hub and installation of charging station is expected to be completed by mid-2023. And upon annual evaluations, the fleet size of electrical buses will be increased accordingly. Next, the development of the R&D precinct will start with the construction of the research facilities, which will take about a year. And finally, the road to a carbon neutral precinct begins with implementing PPA for the housing development so that the green energy could be used to be integrated upon completion. The implementation will be monitored using the KPIs shown below to ensure the feasibility and effectiveness of our strategy.
Don't be dismayed by the huge investment made by 2035, as in turn, Jindabyne will be elevated to greater heights. The cost breakdown is displayed on the left, highlighting the relative investments into the major projects. Transport tallies up to 285 million, accounting for the roads construction, transport hub, and EV infrastructure. The Snowy Hydro precinct includes the R&D Centre, Exploration Centre, and the supporting essential housing. And lastly, in terms of the renewable projects, this includes the Snowy Hydro expansions, solar farm, and smaller scale rooftop PV systems. The key supporting infrastructure drawn from the SAP draft plan have also been included, and this includes the education and recreation precincts. We believe by focusing on educational, high-skilled jobs and renewables, these values will attract private investors in the long term. There are a lot of potential opportunities where the government can provide further subsidies and grants to. For example, the creation of rail and lake transport, accommodation and entertainment sector, and as well as more renewable projects. In summary, the brief tasks us to devise a strategic allocation of $1 billion public investment. So understanding the precinct was critical. We first recognized that the seasonal tourism was unsustainable and that there were more year-round opportunities in Jindabyne. And so that the strategy, and also that the strategy needed to have a core focus on the resident population. And so we proposed a strategic partnership with Snowy Hydro, which facilitates a PPA agreement, transport hub and R&D precinct. And by doing so, Jindabyne will then become a leader in transitioning to renewables. The interconnectivity in the town will also be enhanced and the local economy will be revived. And I guess all in all, we've devised a strategy that aids Jindabyne to put its name back on the map. And that's it. Thank you. We welcome the judges to Q&A now.
Thanks, DAPR, for that presentation. That's quite impressive. I guess we'll get started with the questions. Derek, would you like to kick us off?
I don't have to kick off. I don't know if Mike or Satina have anything to start yet. I'm happy to kick off if they don't. Yeah, well, Mike, it's just,
Derek, I'll kick it off.
Come on, Mike, let's jump in.
Yeah. Let's go for it. So the R&D facility, I see you've got significant funding invested there. Have you thought about a long-term strategy for maintaining that funding beyond your 10-year horizon, given that it's sustaining a large number of jobs in the local area?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question entirely. You're asking for how we would sustain these jobs over a long-term, like past a 10-year horizon, or?
Yeah, so that at the moment your government funding is supporting the R&D centre for over the initial 10-year horizon and bringing jobs and people to the area.
Right.
Longer term, did you think about how that funding, how funding for the centre will be maintained? Is that through further government subsidies, or is it through private sector investment, or is it in revenue generated from sales?
Right, of course. I think I'll start with this question. So I think the whole premise of this sustainability research and development centre will be of a high priority in terms of investments for the government, given that we need to align ourselves as a nation better to these SDG goals to hit that 2050 carbon neutrality. So I think that subsidies won't be an issue in terms of this. Someone else wants to tag along. Okay, that's cool too.
Actually, yeah, just to add on, I think by in terms of the value provided by Snowy Hydro, as they do more research and development into more renewable technologies and more efficient practices, it indirectly, or like in a way, they will be able to find more opportunities to generate power and thus like kind of have more efficient practices in their energy generation and selling practices.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I like the fact that the R&D sort of supports your sustainable carbon neutral approach to your plan and strategy. That all fits neatly together. In terms of your energy generation, I think you've got funding into solar farms and solar PV. Did you also consider broadening that out perhaps to wind farms or other power sectors or power types?
Right. Yeah, I can start off by answering this. In terms of the different types of renewable projects we considered in the precinct, or as a whole, there are like, you know, obviously solar and solar, and in terms of wind, one of the community sentiments we picked up from the Go Jindabyne report is that they value their landscape, their natural landscape a lot, and so and you know, despite us going through reports finding that there were possible locations, for example, on the west side of Jindabyne, we didn't really want to disrupt the natural landscape, especially when the SAP draft plan had already considered a lot of tourism and recreation development in that region. I think in terms of in terms of like geothermal, I think there was just insufficient temperatures, so we considered a more solar oriented project because of the free space on the east side of Jindabyne. Yeah.
Just to tag along to that, of course, Snowy Hydro in itself is a hydro energy generating plant predominantly. So obviously a lot of that R&D will be to solar, but also we'll work on improving these hydroelectricity practices and increasing the efficiency of how we generate that energy as well.
Thanks for your answers.
So from what I'm hearing, really the cornerstone of the precinct itself and building up this area is based around this renewable energy play, essentially. You sort of talk about where the investment was going or where the money was being spent. What I didn't sort of hear much about was where the $5 billion is coming from. Is the intent that the $5 billion is going to come from renewable energy investment? Or where else is that going to be generated from?
Okay, I think I can start us off again unless you want to take this one, wrong.
No, you can go first.
Okay, cool. So I think the premise of our whole strategy, if we flick back to that financial side, was to incentivize a lot of private investment, right? So this Snowy Hydro, obviously it's in partnership with, the environmental strategy component of the strategy is in partnership with Snowy Hydro. That does not necessarily mean the government is putting 48 million into Snowy Hydro. It's more so like we're providing X amount of grants to attract this private investment in Snowy Hydro. Same thing for our transport strategy. Our transport may have a component that is public investment, but a lot of it is more so to do with the grants and attracting private investors, especially in the electric vehicle transport sector. And same thing for our renewables project as well. I think Ron can talk more about the 5 billion.
To the 5 billion. Yeah, I was about to say, because those numbers there don't add up to 5 billion.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Wrong. Would you gonna adjust how it goes to the 5 billion or? Sorry. Okay. I think, yeah. So this was a $1 billion initial public investment, but yes, definitely 5 billion was something we didn't spend a majority of our time looking at. We're more so focused on creating that whole sustainability, a sustainable project so that we could attract, we thought that this would have like a higher priority in terms of investment, in terms of private investment, in terms of transport as well as that. I think it'd be more beneficial for the government that would see like our project as being a future-proofing measure or even like a pilot for future development around Sydney to create that. That would get us to that 5 billion mark.
Yeah, cool. Okay, thanks.
Yep, Satina, Andy, any other questions from your
end?
end?
I might ask a question if that's all right. So thanks again for the presentation. That was really good. I'm just thinking in terms of the R&D space as being the sort of, I guess probably the feature of the investment. Obviously, in putting that space in Jindabyne, you'd be competing with other universities and places around Australia that are also investing in R&D around, I guess, sustainable power solutions and technologies. Just wondering, how you might be able to attract, more people or attract people to that R&D space to make it more competitive and also sustainable in the long term as well.
I might just kick off with this. So, as we know, the Snowy Mountains is like the largest ski resort in the Southern Hemisphere, sorry.
Yeah.
So, there's already that like that audience and that, you know, that mass of people that we're kind of leveraging. And, you know, by implementing a R&D precinct in a place that's already popular, but, you know, a place that's already so big and influential. And not only this, like with the R&D precinct, it's like, yeah, it's a hydroelectric one. So there's not that many around, or at least in bigger sites as big as, you know, the Snowy Mountains that exist in the Southern Hemisphere. So it's like the first of many in a mass this big. So this is how we thought that like we could gain retention over other companies. Like, of course, there's going to be bigger companies that do solar and I guess wind, but the fact that we're partnering up with Snowy Hydro to make a R&D precinct this big and in an area so new, it will probably attract investors and people who want to buy the energy.
Okay, thanks for that. And another question, in terms of the phasing of the cost and the costs behind your estimates, you had that previous slide. Do you have more detail that you can show us as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in terms of financials, I'll kind of just oh, okay. Yeah, I guess in terms of I guess a bit more depth into the rationale behind it. I think in terms of, or just briefly, in terms of the roads, we kind of estimated. We took into account like the Southern Connector Road and also kind of the supporting artillery networks in the R&D precinct area. In terms of the like transport hub, we and the electric charging infrastructure costs, we took inspiration from the recent arena projects for, you know, the electric bus depot and also the supporting infrastructure in Sydney. I think in terms of the housing infrastructure, we kind of just took into consideration the low economic population and as well as the Indigenous communities, and factored in some of the essential housing for those populations as they increase over time. And I guess in terms of this renewable projects costs, I think the closest reference point we used was the projects done in Parks SAP, when we had I think I had a look at their solar projects and just kind of scaled it down a bit. Yeah, I think that's pretty much in summary. Yeah, it's a bit more.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
So, Tina, do you have any more questions?
No, I think I was actually having the same question as Andy, so it's all good. Thanks.
All good, all good. I guess that's it from the judges for the Q&A. Team DAPR, thanks for that. Appreciate the work done. Quite a good effort. We'll get the judges back into their breakout rooms to have a discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I love a good pie chart.
Thank you. That was I think Ferguson who worked on that. Yeah, we got a suggestion from one of the E3 employees that we should like be as visual as possible. So we wanted to include like pie charts and, you know, other graphs and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
so I guess
like Jordan or something, or Abby. Maybe Abby said it.
Oh yeah, Abby, that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you for the suggestion, man.
all good, all good. Yeah. Anyways, all the judges are back here. Let's get started. You guys can introduce yourselves and let us know what you've been up to.
All right. So we're Team DN. My name is Ferguson. I'm a first year, and I'm studying a Bachelor of Science.
Yep. I'm Henry. I'm a second year studying civil engineering.
My name's Tony. Nice to meet you. I'm currently in second year, studying commerce with civil engineering.
I'm Yusra, and I'm currently first year, also studying civil engineering.
Yeah,
Right,
so a lot of first years, second years on too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, mate, we won't be going easy on you.
Yeah, all good, we're ready for
all
it.
good.
So, do you want to start us off, Vic?
Yeah, I'll start us off. Okay.
Yeah.
Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. For this project, our team has proposed a framework to attract population growth in the Snowy Mountains area, as well as foster its economic and social development. We have decided that the education sector is where we'll put about 60% of the budget due to the fact that a good education generally attracts young people to an area. Evidence of this can be seen on the graph to your right. For example, the Australian Capital Territory has a low mean age of about 37. Students at the ANU play a large part in driving this number down. In addition to improving education, improving other sectors such as healthcare, housing, and leisure will be done to aid with the emerging population growth.
Yep. Okay, now let's talk about the core of our framework, which is education. We noticed that in the Snowy Mountains, there was a relatively low rate of higher education, and we wanted to give younger people more opportunities for higher education, as we believe it will lead to young people being able to more easily access higher paying jobs and get social benefits, such as people being able to climb socioeconomic status better. An educational facility that we wanted to invest in was the Snowy Mountains Grammar School to build on its reputation as a sporting school. Now, through this program, we wanted to produce really great athletes, particularly in snow sports. Another facility we identified was the Country University Centre Snowy Monaro. This is a learning development hub which provides university-level distance education. This hub is particularly useful for students who invested in higher education but do not necessarily have the means to be able to study at home. Next slide, please. So our team wanted to address the relatively high age demographic in the area as well. Regional towns such as Armidale and Wollongong have managed to attract younger people into those areas, partially thanks to the university offerings. We wanted to propose to found a new university in Cooma called the Snowy Mountains University. Now, a unique offering that the university could have is in the engineering field in collaboration with the development of Snowy 2.0. We believe that there will be many future job opportunities which can be created here, as well as internship opportunities. Medicine is a discipline which has been known for drawing students into rural areas. And this is because some students choose to take a rural pathway to their medicine programs due to the competitiveness of larger city programs. Lastly, we wanted to suggest leaning heavily towards teaching Aboriginal people's history to allow the Indigenous community in the area to reclaim their history, space, and country. We recommend integrating Aboriginal people's history and arts into the humanities degrees.
Extending on Henry's point on education, a major part of our framework is also to improve the healthcare. Currently, the Cooma Hospital is the only large public medical facility within the Snowy Mountains region. Improving healthcare of Cooma is imperative for our investment plan, as there are certain services and departments that are lacking, such as a 24-hour ambulance service. By improving public healthcare, future and current residents of the Snowy Mountains will see better health outcomes and a higher living standard.
All right, now let's take a look at the issue of housing. The issue of housing is extremely overvaluated, and this is greatly contributed by planning restrictions. To provide a higher standard of living, our proposal for prefab tiny houses within the growing Snowy Mountains community offers a cheaper alternative of living for potential residents who may not want to be burdened by a heavy mortgage. With units in the $44,000 to $60,000 range, anyone can rent or purchase at very affordable prices. These groups of units also boast sustainable designs that can be recycled, relocated, and easily repaired. We believe the coexistence of these prefab tiny houses and mid-rise residentials look to bolster the overall development of the housing sector in this region. However, we must acknowledge that building in the Snowy Mountains means we are building on Indigenous people's land. Despite this, Australian architecture and design ignores cultural and climate nuances. Jack Mitchell, a renowned designer of Aboriginal heritage, said, "An Indigenous person might see colonial buildings as a representation of the destruction of their history and their people." To promote the path of reconciliation, we look to partner with contemporary Aboriginal artists and designers, hopefully from the Black Designs Matter exhibition, to incorporate Aboriginal art in our sustainable housing solution and other structures to promote the care Aboriginal communities have for their culture and the climate. Budget-wise, we've decided to allocate a large proportion of the investment towards design and our sustainable housing solution.
Yeah, so compared to housing, a smaller budget is dedicated to recreation. It is still crucial to enhance recreation and leisure, as it is what the region is already most known for, but instead promoting all season round activities. This can increase population interest and distribution to areas like Jindabyne and Moree without great economic risk. Investments in activities can be flexible to cater for the remaining budget, varying from adrenaline rushing advancements to the snowy resorts with ziplining to more relaxed multicultural-based entertainment and hobbies like an Indigenous arts museum and bushwalking tracks. Even citizens with extra leisure can go create further community bonds with council centres running volunteering events.
And so to complement the recreational infrastructure, we would like to propose to upgrade existing infrastructure in the alpine resorts and introduce new sporting facilities to promote a competitive sporting ecosystem within the Snowy Mountains SAP. A problem we see nowadays is that young, talented athletes are unable to balance their sporting career and school life. We hope to partner with local schools and educational institutions within the precinct to support young Australian athletes with youth development programs and provide graduates with real work experience as support staff in the sporting world. In the long term, we believe this positions the Snowy Mountains to be a global hotspot for athletes as an all-season round training location and a potential international stage for winter sports competitions.
Furthering on our team's objective, developing commercial and supply markets is also essential to providing for and maintaining esteemed living standards. We can achieve this by logically placing infrastructures in densely populated towns like Cooma and Jindabyne that will provide easy access where majority people benefit most, which will help maximize social and economic growth. Public infrastructure surrounding education and healthcare are also imperative to meeting the community's basic needs and creating essential jobs. Although what initially seems costly, the price of living can actually be greatly offset by the vast supply of energy sources, like expanding the already advanced Snowy Hydro scheme to adding windmill farms to reap the benefits of the region's windy climate. Other private infrastructures that we've identified here on screen are also essential to maintaining the region's sustainability through securing consumer trust, supplying jobs and goods, and promoting multicultural influences and lifestyles. The addition to the necessary and improved services and facilities furthers our goal to attract the younger generation, which will help grow future families and drive the whole population in the Snowy Mountain region. Our plan ensures that we can accommodate for that projected influx of people long-term and sustainably. Thank you for listening, and we would like to now open up the floor for Q&A.
Thanks for that presentation, team, on distinction. It's quite good. Let's get started. We'll start off with Satina. Do you have any questions?
Could we go into a little bit detail of some of your financials?
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure whether it's in the. Okay, great. Yeah. Do you mind to just give us a quick rundown of the thinking?
Oh sure. Yeah, I can do that. Yep. So basically, early on in our research, our goal was to bring in young people into the Snowy Mountains because we believe that if young people come to move there, there's more of a chance for generational residents, so they'll stay there for longer with when they make families and whatnot. So we decided that the best way to bring in young people would be education. So with the public initial investment of $1 billion, we decided to put 600 million into education more specifically 500 to a new university. So these numbers weren't just random numbers. We did a lot of research on universities around the world and startup costs, and we found out that approximately 400 to 500 million would be enough to start a decently sized campus. Furthermore, we looked at Australian prices specifically for startup cost per square meter for regional universities, since Snowy Mountains isn't a huge city yet. So we thought that getting regional prices per square meter would be more realistic. And this final value of 600 million out of the $1 billion investment, we believe was pretty realistic. And now for the other stuff, healthcare and housing was mainly to accommodate for the influx of new citizens moving into the Snowy Mountains region. Since we're not building a completely new healthcare facility, we're just improving the current one, which is the Kuma Hospital. We thought that 80 million was pretty realistic, because we looked at some prices per square meter in Australia to build healthcare facilities. In terms of housing, we also looked at prices per square meter for housing, and we found out that 80 million would be realistic for that. In terms of the rest for transport, since transport is fairly expensive in the beginning, and since people would move later on into the Snowy Mountains, we thought a much lower investment of 10 million would be enough initially, but with the future follow-up investment, we decided to put 300 million. And for the rest, such as art and culture, sporting, recreation, and other mentioned infrastructures, we just kind of split the public investment somewhat equally based on priority. So yeah.
Yep. Henry, you want to expand on education? If not, I can expand on the housing part.
I just wanted to add, we basically took examples of rural universities such as University of Wollongong, which was established in 1951, I believe, and a few other examples. And we took the location and time scaling factors, and we like the number, like the figure on screen, 600 million, is more of a ballpark, like preliminary sort of estimate, but we think it is realistic for our public initial investment. Yeah.
And then where does the extra $3 billion for private follow-up investment come from? Where's that money coming from?
I can answer that if you guys want.
Yeah.
So we were thinking, because we're partnering with Snowy Hydro for this government initiative, like Snowy Hydro is a government-owned corporation, and we can sort of market it based on their like image at the moment. We wanted sponsors of like Snowy Hydro and people who are like attracted from Snowy Hydro to be able to come to the area and want like the government gives like grants and stuff to spark investment in this area from the private sector.
Yeah, I just want to also add on to that. I think having the Snowy Hydro in the Snowy Mountains is actually a lot of untapped potential in terms of education, because in our opinion, I think it is very beneficial to have a university really close to an infrastructure like the Snowy Hydro. And also in a couple of years, they're planning to build the Snowy 2.0, which is more into renewable energy and all that. So I think that not just within the Snowy Mountains, but also private kind of like STEM industries would want to invest into the Snowy Mountains University, because it would provide high quality workers because of how close it is to the Snowy Hydro and the Snowy 2.0.
Is that the reason you've located it in Kuma and not Jindabyne?
Yeah, I think we prioritize Kuma, one, because of the population, like the relative population compared to the rest of the Snowy Mountains region. But we wanted to collaborate heavily with Snowy Hydro, which is why we decided to put it in Kuma.
Your small houses, which I think has the potential to be a really good idea, especially for the transient population that comes in there, especially in the wintertime, certainly as a stopgap. Who's building that? Is that something that
Right.
the government's looking at building, or something that you're looking at?
So I'll take this question. So pretty much what we've planned to do is we were going to contact several contractors of these small housing units, and hopefully we could come up with like a bulk cost or like buy in bulk, and like sort of contract that. But essentially what we're doing by setting up these small houses and like these mid-rise residentials is to kind of represent a viable demonstration project. So we're kind of telling private investors, hey, like, you know, this is working. There is an influx of new homeowners wanting to come into this area. There's an influx of young people coming into this area. Therefore, we need more accommodation. And hopefully that message can go out to private investors in the future who could come in and build high rises or like more commercial buildings in the future. Yeah.
Okay, so you're looking at the government basically being the ones that deliver these small houses in the first instance, and being the, I guess, the owner and the lesser of them. You're looking at some kind of rent to buy, or is it just they're going to be New South Wales government's an ongoing landlord, or have you put much thought into that?
Yeah. So the New South Wales government is not going to be an ongoing landlord. We think that those tiny houses should more be a flexible solution. So let's say a niche, not a niche, but anyone who wants to live in this area due to the other solutions, such as the education solution that we've provided, since it's targeted to like more for young peoples, we were going to, I guess, provide these tiny houses as investment opportunities for the public. Hopefully we could come up with a, I guess, system in which we would only let young people who are going to, who are within the region and attending educational institutions in the area to own these houses, sort of as a, sort of as financial support. But hopefully, you know, as more private investment comes, you know, it kind of evolves into like a movement, like a sustainable movement where people are just in this tiny house kind of like
So what I'm hearing, Tony, is you guys have come up with what you think is a good idea, and it needs a little bit more work to think through it, which is fine. You can just say that, that's not a problem, because I think it is a really good idea, but it probably needs a little bit of thought to figure out exactly where the government stops being a landlord and when they start encouraging private investment. But that's fine. There's no problem with you guys saying we came up with a good idea. We haven't thought it all the way through yet.
Right.
And the final one there was the new sporting ecosystems, which I thought was a really cool idea.
Yeah.
My question was, I wasn't entirely sure what the investment was. I think that there's some potential there, but I couldn't quite figure out exactly what it was that you were spending the money on. And when I look down here, you've kind of divided the remainder and allocated an amount. I suspect that that's probably how the things on the bottom of the table are. But as you sort of put much more thought into that new sporting ecosystem and what you can do there.
Yeah. So your first part of the question, which was how we're going to allocate it with allocate that money into the sporting ecosystem. So, like for the technology or like the equipment within our alpine resorts. So that was something that would definitely be part of that sporting ecosystem, because our sporting ecosystem at the moment is only focused towards winter sports. Now that would definitely, hopefully, I guess, evolve into other sports as well. But yeah, right now the focus is improving the equipment in alpine resorts. Also, like there are certain snowmaking machines which are very, very like the quality of snowmaking machines are very popular these days in the winter sports industry. So like updated snowmaking equipment is also going to be part of that equipment, part of that investment. Chairlifts we have to ensure that chairlifts are also updated and the latest, I guess.
But you're talking there. You're talking
Yeah.
there. If you're talking about snowmaking equipment and lifts, you're
Yeah.
talking about stuff that's sitting in Threadbone Perisher, which is owned by private organisations. So you're not looking at cutting checks to private organisations, surely.
Cutting checks to private organisations, no. So our sporting ecosystem solution is pretty separate. We want to be partnering with educational institutions. So I think we would be giving money to educational institutions such as the Snowy Mountains Grammar School, for instance,
which is also private. Institution.
They are private. I guess it is more tailored towards our education solution. So like in a sense, like all our solutions, they kind of go together. And it is in a sense, in a bigger picture, a big ecosystem. We're hoping after the university is built, maybe that could be a big focus point for us in terms of the sporting ecosystem.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's good. Thanks.
Yeah. Any more questions?
I had a question. Thanks. Mike, Abby. Thanks very much for your presentation. Really interested in this idea of building the university. So I'll sort of ask some more questions around that. In particular, building a university in that area. Just wondering how big you think the university is likely to be, and sort of how many students you might think would need to attend to make it sustainable.
Yep. I can start with this question if you guys want. So we were thinking of starting with like sort of small scale, and we wanted to conduct like interviews and research of what people in the area thought about, like gauge the public engagement with this university first, and see the interest of students graduating from high school who wanted to attend this uni, right? So at the moment, we were thinking of a student range of in the hundreds. That's about like as specific we can go, like maybe 500 to 1,000.
Right.
And this is because at the moment, it's not profitable to build any bigger, because we would need to recruit lecturers and teachers from like the local area, as well as source them from outside and give government grants to incentivize teachers and staff to migrate to the area. Yeah.
So the intent would be to build up over time from that size to something much larger.
Yeah. So that's the idea. We wanted, like, taking our university, for example, like UNSW, the actual size of the university is like, it's built in quite a densely populated urban area, right? And we think that we don't need like that many square kilometers of university to begin with. And we think that a lot of the classes can take place in the same sort of areas as each other, and we fit it within the schedule of what's realistic. And we think that we can iterate and build upon this uni as we attract more people into the region.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just kind of want to.
Do you think most of the students are likely to come from outside of the region or from within the region?
We like to imagine that in the. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Did you want to continue?
Oh no. Is there a strategy to change that as well?
Yeah. So we think in the short run, it's difficult to attract students within the region, as a lot of students are in the mindset of continuing with TAFE or a certificate after they finish high school, right? So we think that the majority of the students would come from outside of the uni in the short term, but hopefully we want to encourage this knowledge worker, higher education mindset over time into the region, so that students in this region are able to benefit from the social benefits, such as being able to get into higher socioeconomic positions.
To add on to that, also because we would also like to get outsider people, because the university has unique aspects that not other universities have. Like, for example, we have the snowy hydro skiing that not every other uni has. And people outside of the area will see that as like a benefit and will want to travel there. So that way it's like a selling point for our university, that we can also get outsider people, and then also the local people can, when they see that external population growth, they can see that, like, okay, and get into that mindset of higher education, building on top of that and growing the university as well.
Yeah, and also, like, even for our sporting solution, our sporting solution doesn't just reach out nationwide, but we can also, I guess, invite people from overseas as well who may be interested in developing their sporting careers, because during uni is a very essential and important part of, I guess, sports progression for our youth. So yeah, that could also be a selling point too.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No, thanks very much. That was good.
Yeah.
If there's not any more questions, I think Mike hasn't asked a question yet, but all good. We may get started on the discussion between the judges. Let's get into our breakout rooms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, team.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Alrighty. Good job, team.
Good job, team.
Good job.
Best of luck. And good luck to the next team as well. Evergrande.
Looks like we have everyone here. Yep, we have Jack. There we go. Yep, so all the judges are back. We've had our discussion on Team for Evergrande. Nice name. We'll let you guys get started.
Awesome. Cool. So we're Team for Evergrande. I'm Penny.
I'm Jack.
Hi, I'm Abigail.
And I'm Grace.
And we're all fourth years at UNSW. Before we kick off, we just want to say we really enjoyed, I think, the big budget the case gave us. It just allowed everyone to be a bit more creative, especially in our thinking. But yeah, we're a bit over time, so let's kick this off. Just confirming everyone can hear us and that everyone can see the screen share.
Yep.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep. Thanks.
Awesome. Sweet. So just kicking us off. How can we sustainably reinvigorate the Snowy Mountains Special Activation Precinct through commercial, environmental, and social infrastructure initiatives? We're here today to present a two-pronged strategy to make momentum by building a sustainable future and expanding the identity of the region. The key revenue driver of our strategy is the Mountaintop Solar, which has an IRR of 12%. So to start off, what has the Snowy Mountain got to offer today? The region has an average middle-aged population of about 20,000, only half are actually employed residents. And the top industries here are agriculture, construction, and hospitality. But tourism alone actually accounts for more than 20% of the region's gross regional product. With an economy really centered around tourism and increasingly shorter snow seasons, alongside other increasing environmental impacts from climate change, we've seen a big decrease in the tourism business and an increasing struggle to maintain profits and economic growth. On top of this, growing urbanisation and a lack of business developments has really disincentivized young Australians and young professionals and families from staying in the region. This has only been exacerbated really by the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this really raised the question of how can we sustainably reinvigorate the Snowy Mountains? Our team has identified two high-level goals for the SAP. The first, to develop infrastructure and environmental resilience. And the second, to create a cultural uplift to showcase the region's other offerings outside of the snow season. The criteria really guiding the infrastructure resilience is centered around how can we combat climate change risk and also adapt to the Snowy Mountains climate. In terms of culture, we recognise and aim to expand the persona of the region beyond Australia's #1 snow destination. Underpinning all of this are consistent considerations as well for environmental, social and governance factors.
So with this goal of infrastructure resilience and cultural uplift for developing the Special Activation Precinct, I'd now like to present to you our recommendation that focuses on making momentum. In solidifying the region's infrastructure, Mountaintop Solar aims to invest in renewable solar energy generation while helping sustainably power the precinct's snow industry. Alongside this, in driving a refined brand to the area, nurturing culture will help develop the region's niche identity in the ice wine industry, along with developments in recreational sports activities. So with a very strong brand association to the snow, Mountaintop Solar seeks to develop a solar farm on the mountains with over 40,000 solar panels optimally positioned, able to produce 1.5 times more power than urban locations. And this project will help provide direct subsidized access to clean energy for resorts, corporate and residential buildings in the area, and will help strengthen the region's strong identity to the snow by helping power innovative new snow technologies designed by NeveXN, whose machines produce snow in temperatures above 0 degrees, helping extend the snow season that brings new and exciting experiences for patrons and to reinvigorate the local economy through what it's best known for. Revamping the area by creating distinct sports and recreational facilities with these technologies and through upgrading existing mountain trails and sporting grounds will create an interconnected experience that leverages the area's unique environmental capabilities to double down on and also to entice a new level of tourism even during off seasons for the better.
To help nurture the culture of the Snowy Mountains region, we plan to encourage the production of ice wine in the area, taking advantage of its unique weather and environment to become one of the only ice wine producers in Australia, which will add a unique element to the Snowy Mountains identity. To further cultivate the area's culture and especially celebrate its local produce of food and wine, this project would organise festivals which would involve the community to gather people and showcase the region's beautiful products and atmosphere. Another aspect to highlight in the region is the extensive range of mountain and water sports, which is available year-round in this one area, especially with our planned upgrades and developments of the mountain trails and sporting grounds. Nationally marketing the range of activities accessible in the Snowy Mountains, alongside hosting sport competitions and the launch of the newly upgraded festivals, will present the region as a desirable holiday destination for local and international tourists. The combination of ice wine, the area's local food and drink produce, and the availability of extreme sports in all seasons will advertise an Australian culture which is extremely unique to the Snowy Mountains and increase tourism in general, but especially in the off seasons. Regarding the project's implementation, Mountaintop Solar will take 2 years to plan, develop, and launch, commencing operations in early 2024. By early 2022, we plan to have gained approval for the development planning, acquired power purchase and land lease agreements, and applied for a grant with ARENA. Project construction would then start and be completed by 2024. And at the beginning of 2023, we will begin the planning of the cultural festivals and activities, the research and development of ice wine production, and the growth of mountain and water sport activities. 2024 is when we will commence the project operation and launch the festivals and sports marketing. We will also purchase and begin installation of the snow machines, which is to be completed within the year. Early 2025 is when we will start assessing and planning for possible further infrastructure developments, such as schools and housing. With our project, we identified 3 main risks that are prominent in our strategy. Firstly, we face the risk of unexpectedly high funding requirements for maintenance and refurbishments. Moreover, during operations, we face compliance risks, particularly accusations or charges for the cause of power outages in the area. And lastly, we face the risk of price volatility. However, we have identified 4 key partners who will help mitigate all these risks, which I will now pass on to Grace to discuss.
Thanks, Anna. So we understand that Mountaintop Solar is a massive project, which is why we scouted 4 key partners who will be really important to the operational and financial success of our project. Firstly, with Origin, we'll sign a PPA in order to secure inflows at 50 cents per kilowatt hour, tackling the pricing risk that we identified earlier. We'll also apply for a grant from ARENA, who has an investment focus on renewable energy projects, which will tackle the funding risk. And we'll also employ the help of Q-Cells on the installation side, who has a competitive advantage in Australia as their solar panels are tailored for our harsh conditions. And lastly, as Jack discussed earlier, we'll also employ NeveXN's green snow machines. Now, with our projects, we'll really be able to build momentum for the economic activity in the Snowy Mountains. Indeed, at peak asset allocation for Mountaintop Solar, we'll be realizing more than 16 million in profits per year And this doesn't include the fact that our snow machines will indirectly prolong the profits that we make from winter sports. But all in all, we see that the next 30 years heavily outweighs the development costs for mountaintop solar, as well as our subsidy and grant allocations. Overall, our projects are incredibly eco-friendly, with mountaintop solar emitting little to no carbon emissions and waste. And also our emphasis on promoting businesses related to mountain sports and ice wine will really help us establish a national presence for the snowy mountains. And lastly, with our strong diversity policies in place for the 200 plus jobs that we create per year, we'll be establishing a much more inclusive community in the snowy mountains. Thank you.
Thank you all for your presentation. I guess we'll get started with the Q&A. Would any of the judges like to kick us off?
Mike, you want to go first, mate?
I'll just jump in there and start by asking which resort are we putting the Never XN snowmaking machines in? Given that
Just FYI, guys, I can tell you right now from what I know of Mike, you meant to say Threadboat. Is that correct, Mike? You want the Threadboat?
Yeah, I think Threadboat would be a good option. Listen,
So I'm happy to take that question.
just mindful that we're talking about investing in what's already a privately run resort.
Yeah, understood. So we see that, at least at first thinking when it came to the strategy, that Threadboat was a really good target, at least for this particular implementation, at least in the short term, just to test out, how exactly it would work, especially because of the high traction in the area when it comes to that particular resort. We do also understand that if we're putting in money essentially from a government's perspective to essentially fuel, a private corporation's activities, that there needs to be some sort of return on investment. We do see, obviously, being the snowy mountains, there is a huge brand association to the region. We do see from an infrastructure resilience perspective into the long run that the snow seasons are actually getting shorter and shorter. So in order to reinvigorate the local economy, there is that direct logic, at least in our view, when it comes to investing into the private sector from this perspective. But we do also understand that too much reliance on the private sector when it comes to an investment like this is a bit risky in itself. So potentially expanding into government initiatives and potentially local council initiatives that uses these snow machines for local activities and festivals are also ancillary efforts that we've been looking into as well.
Yeah. Sorry, Jack, sorry to cut you off there. Just going to say thank you for the answer. It's a good response. In terms of the spend, I think most of your spend was on mountaintop solar based on the graph you put up. How much is allocated towards the mountain sports, which you talked about covering off a lot of summer off-season summer season sports?
Yep, I'm happy to answer this one. So the mountaintop sports and ice wine businesses will be subsidized, and we'll also provide grants for them, and that is all included in the subsidies and grant allocation of around $16 million.
Yep, thank you for that.
So if we come back to the solar power, and I might have missed it on one of your slides, so apologies for that. How big is the mountaintop solar?
Yep, sure thing. So if we go to the first financials page, Penny. So if we look at the, operating assumptions and specifications, we've got almost or over 100,000 panels, and they each generate around 6,000 kilowatts per hour. In terms of sizing, we believe that it will be bigger than the current solar farm that's in the Snowy Mountains at the moment. The only differentiation is that we have high efficiency per panel, and it will also be on the mountain tops as well, which contributes to their efficiency. Mm-hmm.
It comes back to a question that I probably asked a couple of other the rest of the New South Wales government is getting out of owning energy developing infrastructure. Why is the New South Wales government looking at investing in energy infrastructure in this case? New South Wales government does not inherently own energy generators anymore. They're getting out of that. So they're all owned by private organisations. So why is the New South Wales government looking at actually building their own solar farm?
I'm gonna can answer a bit of this. I'm gonna also hand it over to Jack in a second. But I think we kind of saw two things here. One is obviously being a lot of focus recently on sustainability and like reducing carbon emissions. So we know that for a fact, like there's a lot of pressure on the government to kind of move back into this space. Not saying that the government is going to be holding on to this like for long term. We have discussed the potential of like obviously kind of pushing for initiatives and setting these things up for kind of private companies to come over and take over on this. The other thing I think is also on this is that we kind of recognize like there is a lot of potential in the region for solar development. Like we kind of looked into wind, solar, and we already know there's no hydro already. But I think the comparison between wind and solar was that wind was a lot more disruptive to the landscape, and with solar we just saw a lot more I guess what's that word, like synergy with also our strategy with the new kind of snow machines that were being developed, which are able to produce snow at above zero temperatures, and that the synergy between solar and those snow machines worked a lot better. Handing over more to come to Jack as to why like this is a good initiative for the government to kind of kickstart and go back into before handing off to potentially privatized companies.
Yeah, so I'm happy to have a chat about this. So obviously, as you've mentioned, Derek, there is a bit of a withdrawal from this particular segment. One of the theses that we had, or like just thesis points that we had around why we went through this particular channel was having a look at specifically INSW's infrastructure strategy, and we had a look state infrastructure strategy, and there was a big forward-thinking view in terms of infrastructure resilience going into the next few decades, especially as more and more climate risks become more apparent within the environment, especially in urban environments. So one of the things that we did see was that conservative energy generation, conservative ways of generating energy, especially within the Snowy Mountains region, at least in our view, was potentially going to be disrupted by these points of risk when it comes to different changes to the environment. So we do see that, in our view, at least when it comes to mountaintop, the mountaintop region, and in regards to Neve Extend in terms of their synergy in purposefully building, sorry, not Neve Extend, but the solar panel company of choice. They have a lot of industry knowledge in terms of actually implementing these solar panels in such terrain. And so we see that from a forward-looking view, we're able to actually provide some sort of degree of infrastructure resilience that will hopefully empower councils and also a lot of other local businesses to get in on the program that we're essentially trying to build when it comes to providing direct access to clean energy as well.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. And I guess my final question is, you've talked about that investment. How do you see this investment driving that next level of investment of $5 billion? Where's my $5 billion coming from?
Yep, sure thing. Happy to take this one as well. So we see the main driver of our, investment being the amount of energy generated per panel. Compared to the other solar farms in Australia, we generate more than 1,000 more kilowatts per hour, which means that we're able to have a much larger profit margin compared to the other solar farms. In terms of the operating costs, those are pretty standard, and we're not really cutting any costs there. We take into account building utilities, repairs and maintenance, worker wages, a bit of insurance as well, and obviously contingency risk, contingency provisions as well into our operating costs in case.
So if I just cut you off there, so that talks about how this investment is going to be profitable, which is absolutely fantastic. But what we're looking for is we're saying we're going to invest $1 billion. What we want is from that $1 billion industry to come in on the back of it and invest another $5 billion. So where is that other investment coming from? Who's coming in? Who's seeing it and saying, brilliant, they've done some fantastic stuff here. I'm now going to come and I'm going to put my money in here because I can make a buck in this area as well. So where's that investment coming from?
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I might kick it off really briefly, touch on the second part of our strategy before handing back to Grace to kind of run through some of the numbers there. But we see, like, I think we mentioned before, we know that ski season is shortening dramatically because of climate change and other kind of like climate factors, which is, I think, why like there's two parts of this. One is extending or kind of prolonging the snow season with these new snow machines to really kind of like really capitalize on the fact that snow season is the reason why people go to the snowy mountains, right? It's the #1 place in Australia for snow. So if we can kind of maintain the tourism there and also kind of maintain the speed of tourism growth there, that's going to bring in companies like reinvesting back into resorts and ski sports, snow festivals. And then the other part of this is nurturing the culture of the region. We've looked at other kind of regions in Australia, for example, the Hunter Valley region, not only for kind of food, right, and food and wine. We recognize that like Snowy Mountains really only has a branding for snow. We want to kind of rebrand it as also a region for snow and food. So food and wine region with a focus on ice wines. And what we see there is then there is now potential for kind of other private companies, investors to come in, invest in the agriculture and the food industry, and really much more in hospitality industry as well, because we recognize that that region has a lot of that sort of development and existing infrastructure, but what it lacks at the moment is kind of a draw for tourism to go to there. I think handing off now to Grace for the numbers.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of, I guess, potential investors that we looked at as well. So as the New South Wales government, we would be able to form a consortium with perhaps like a superannuation fund, such as Aware Super, seeing as we have a large ESG focus with our mountaintop solar project. It's definitely very feasible and viable to get them on board and start a consortium in investing in our projects further and further developing maybe more renewable projects as well down the line. We see that Aware Super has already invested in renewables projects prior to this, such as like Snowtown 2, which is a wind farm. They invested that in that 2 years ago. So it's definitely, I guess, one of the investment focuses and thus a really viable partner for us as well. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yep, cool, thanks.
Yep, so is there any more questions? Have we received any questions from Andy or Tina?
I'll ask a question. Thanks very much for your presentation. Really great effort. I guess maybe I misunderstood, but I was just wondering if you could explain why it was, I guess, a better location to develop solar in the Snowy Mountains than, say, other locations. Is there an advantage of the Snowy Mountains for that sort of investment?
Yeah, happy to answer this. So there were two key drivers behind this. The first was sort of hinging on my previous answer around infrastructure resilience. We do see that there's a little bit more of a resilient approach in this way, especially since the region is over the next 5-10 years or so, through our readings, is going to be experiencing a few climate risks. The second driver, which potentially is the more important one, I think it was on, if I go back to slide, Penny, you might need to help me out here. I think it was slide 6. We do see that these particular solar panels within this specific positioning actually generates about 1.5 times, so 150% of the average amount that like a typical solar panel per unit would actually produce, just because it's optimally positioned close, to the sun exposure. So it was kind of a mix of both of those two things. On one hand, infrastructure resilience, and on the other hand, actually being able to pump out more energy per panel.
So just exploring that a bit more. So you're suggesting that the solar panels would need to be located in a location with snow in the mountains to get that benefit?
Yep, really quickly, I think we looked into the east-facing part of the mountain where it would actually generate a lot more. I think Jack gave numbers earlier to how much more energy would be generating on the mountain kind of versus on the ground, like just because of like that ideal positioning on the east side?
Right. So they're likely to have to be located inside the national park then, where the snow is located.
And indications will be on this. It was just an example.
Is that correct? Would that be the intent?
It's just products.
Yeah, that will most likely be the case.
Okay, great. That's great. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks for that. Satina, do you have any more questions to add?
No more questions for me.
All good, all good. Thanks, team for Evergrande. That was some good efforts right there. I guess can I please get the judges back into the breakout rooms for us to have a discussion?
Thank you, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, but let me know when you guys are ready and we'll get started.
I think we're all ready.
Yep, so easy. So essentially what we'll do is first we'll go through some generic and overall feedback, and then the judges will provide some specific feedback for each of the teams. And then after that, what we will do is announce the runner-up and then the winner, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I'll pass it on to you then.
Yeah, so I'll let Derek start off with some of the high-level summarized feedback. So Derek, you want to get started?
Yep, we probably don't need to share the screen anymore. Fantastic, brilliant. Thanks very much. Well, listen, first of all, congratulations to all of you. They were all, very good presentations, especially given that you've got day jobs in uni. So to be able to find time to get together as teams and put these together, especially with the amount of work that we saw in the presentation, has been absolutely fantastic. So much credit to everybody. We thought they were really, really good. I thought you handled our questions pretty well, given that the pressure was certainly on with some of the answers. So again, congratulations to everybody in that. A few really high level comments that's worthwhile noting, especially as you sort of move through. Now, some of you are in second year, you'll sort of move to third and fourth year, and some of you in fourth year are going to start interviewing with a variety of organisations. And case studies are going to be something which you will need to become more and more accustomed to, and some of them will be strategic kind of case studies like this. And really, there's probably two really important ones. The first is answer the question. So the question was, what's the investment and where's to get that $5 billion investment? So you needed to talk about where you were spending the $1 billion and where that $5 billion was then coming from. Some of you did that better than others. Some of you really struggled with identifying how you were going to attract the $5 billion worth of investment. And to be fair, $5 billion worth of investment in the Snowy Mountains is a rather large, swat of money. That buys at least 2 houses in Mossman these days. So, that's quite a lot of money. And on this specific question, it's talking about where the government should invest and what the government does. So, what is the government in government for? And for these kind of precincts, the special activation precincts, really it probably comes down to setting up a framework to allow people to invest. So what you need to do to set up that framework, you've got to make it easier for investors. So you want supporting infrastructure, and there was a few really good ideas that came through. There were some ideas there around new roads, about improving roads, about improving boring stuff like sewage treatment works, about improving black spots on telcos and things like that. All those things are supporting infrastructure that allows people to then invest. So if you're going to subdivide an area, then you provide all the roads, all the water, all the drainage, so that it's really easy for people to come in and throw their money at it. So that's one of the areas that the government looks at in their special activation precincts. The other thing which is very useful are those investment anchors. So those might be, and we saw a few examples of it. We saw universities. So that's a potential anchor. Whether or not that's necessarily the right one for this area, I don't know, but universities, sport, investment in sport, investment in well-being and stuff like that. Again, sport and recreation is a area that the government can invest in, and healthcare and further education, again, is another area. What we're seeing in some of these special activation precincts is we're seeing those big support, those big investments in the supporting infrastructure, and we're seeing some big investments in anchors. And then that's what brings everybody in. That's what brings in the additional investment. So that was really one of the areas that those were probably two of the areas that we were looking at and expecting to see. And some of you did that really, really well. So that was great. You spend a lot of time developing up your answers, getting it right in your head, doing all the supporting work, and we can see that with the 40, 50, 60 odd slides. So there's a lot of thought that each of the group have done. And there's some things that you haven't thought about. And that's fine, because we've given you a set period of time and your uni students, and it's acceptable that you don't know all the answers. One of the things to be very conscious of moving into case studies, and even when you're talking with clients, especially when you're talking with clients, because they'll know, is don't bullshit. If you don't know the answer, just say I don't know the answer. It's really, really simple. It's there were questions that were asked that was obvious that you guys, the presenters knew the answer, and we got to it. There were other times where it was clear that the people that were answering the question didn't know and they were struggling. In those times, just a simple, that's a good point. We didn't look at that. We could have looked at that, and then we just move on. Not a problem at all. So I think that's probably, there's probably nothing that grates a client more than listening to somebody try to pretend that they know the answer when it's clear that they don't. Because all it does is detract from all the really, really good work that you've done. So, from a general feedback, that's sort of a couple of points that I'd note. Andy, Satina, Mike, have you got anything else to add to that?
Yeah, look, I'll just jump in there quickly. Responding to the brief, as Derek said, is really important. Making sure you tick off the things that are being asked, and most of you did that really well. One thing that I kept looking for, and I didn't see, I don't think, in too many of the presentations, was thinking about stakeholder engagement. Stakeholders like Kosciuszko National Park, like the council, the Monaro District Council, whoever is council in Jindabyne, and government departments such as Department of Planning or, say, Department of Transport, responsible for the road upgrades that some of you were thinking of proposing, and maybe coming up with ideas to offset some of your costs by engaging with those stakeholders and getting their contribution to an agreement to some of the ideas in the plan. The other thing to note is that the existing SAP focuses on Jindabyne and the Kosciuszko National Park. Some of you focused solely on Jindabyne, others solely on Kosciuszko National Park. Not many covered all of the region in its entirety, and something to think about. Whilst not trying to dilute your spend across the whole region, think about the connectivity of your ideas from centered anchored in one location or one of the towns, but providing benefit beyond that town to other parts of the region. Yeah, so that's probably, I'll hand it over to Andy or Satina.
Satina, anything else to add?
In terms of general comments, no. I'll wait for the individual comment back.
Cool. Andy?
I think that was well covered. Thanks, Derek and Mike.
Thanks, guys. So I think, Abby, we were now just going to provide just a couple of small comments. I think Abby is going to sort of organise some broader feedback to each of the individual groups. But we thought, that given you've got sort of the four of us here, that it's worthwhile us providing a little bit of feedback on each of the presentations, and probably more so much the ideas that were presented than the presentations themselves. I actually thought most of the presentations were done really, really well. But certainly the ideas, and so we're just going to go through from top to bottom. So I think I'm first off the bat with ECC and the enormous $1 billion snow centre. So a couple of good things on that. One, you certainly went big. I was not expecting someone to put forward a, all-weather snow centre in Jindabyne as an idea. But, somebody did go there. I think overall, I just can't see it ever stacking up personally. And I can't see it ever stacking up from a government investment perspective. The government, I could never see investing that amount of money in a snowmaking centre. It's the kind of thing that a private investor would look at doing. It was great that you went big. I think you probably overstretched a little bit on that, and as a result, it probably diluted what I thought was some of the best ideas that were presented. I thought the bypass of Jindy was a fantastic idea and should probably be done. It should just be done. It's a really, really good idea, because what that bypass then does is the bypass then allows you to really decrease the size of that other road. The main road at the moment goes through Nuggets Crossing, which then allows you to activate that entire waterside area. I think that if you had have built on that, it would have been certainly within Jindy. That in itself was really, really good. And it was only when we started looking through the remainder of your appendices that we could see the really good work that you'd actually done in thinking through that bypass and then that activation of the recreation area around Lake Jindabyne. I thought that those ideas there were really, really good, and probably deserved a little bit more time. Would have been great to have heard a little bit more about that. So very brief feedback on mine. That's sort of what I thought of that. Who's doing Bumble Bee?
Yeah, I'll take it from here, Derek. So on the Bumble Bee presentation, really like the identification and framing of the problem as an infrastructure shortfall and an unsustainable seasonal economy, which was holding back long-term growth. Good mix of transport and social infrastructure ideas. Like the fact that you recognise Snowy Hydro was being upgraded, so you didn't need to spend money on that on the power front. The concept of improving connectivity to Jindabyne, absolutely essential, given that most people arrive there via road, but often private vehicles. I think you had flights from Sydney to Cooma in the mix, maybe Brisbane to Cooma in the mix, even better. Well done for thinking in that connectivity space, bringing people in to drive up the tourism. On the social infrastructure side, we love the waterfront activation idea, combined with recognising a gap in social infrastructure and looking for a livable solution that suited not just the tourists coming to the town, but the people that live there. And that goes to utility upgrades and wastewater and so forth. Strategically at a high level, you provided a combination of tourism, livability, but address some transport and social infrastructure, combine that with urban development to kickstart increase in tourism. I think that's quite a solid formula and good thinking. The power sector, there was opportunity there perhaps to expand into other forms of sustainable power, and also perhaps some connectivity to the ski fields and the Kosciuszko National Park in one way or another. Good allocation of capital expenditure, not spread too thin, targeted appropriately. Probably the one thing left in my mind is how you're going to attract those developers to spend the $5 billion, as we've mentioned earlier, how to get them to invest in the dwelling construction and support the growth in the area. So at the end of the day, does the client get an understanding of the potential for investing into this project? Yes, I think you made that clear. Good public investment targets. On the private sector side, perhaps not quite so clear, but good attempt, guys.
Hello?
Yeah, Andy, we can hear you now.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I'll give feedback on the DAP team. So yeah, so appreciate the presentation. It was really, it was quite good. And the idea at the core of it, I think, which was the R&D precincts, really responded to your analysis of the needs, which I thought was done really well. So, you know, the idea of having the R&D centre in Jindabyne, I guess, supported the sort of needs around the social development, the community, and the broader sort of objectives that we're looking to achieve. I guess in terms of where it took, you probably could have fleshed that idea out a lot more in the presentation and the material also that you provided. So because that was sort of the core of your I guess strategy, fleshing that out and exploring in a bit more detail how that could be delivered, and also how you know, how that could be successful and sustainable over a longer term, I think could have been explored a little bit further. But I think the idea itself was really excellent. So I think that, and also making sure that you're able to respond to hard questions around the sort of core of your idea would have probably resulted in a better presentation. But I think overall, really good idea, and again, strong thinking through the whole strategy and sort of what it was responding to in terms of I guess what the question of the core was. Noting Derek's comments. Handing over to Satina, is it?
That's right. So I'm going to speak to Team BN. So I think one thing that probably stand out from your presentation is some of your very bold ideas. So you actually looking at the aspect of probably due into quite a bit of details as well around education. So this is a team talking about the university ideas and also investing in some of the sporting facilities and sporting in terms of education. So we thought that was you know, something that outside squares. The bit that we thought might need to think a bit more carefully is the location of the educations where those universities should be. So currently you're talking about the Kuma area. We thought that might be a better choice to be able to really attract the student to migrate to the university there, is to make sure that there's enough infrastructures and the attractions of the area to offer. So maybe a better idea would be Jindabyne. But in terms of really how you actually think outside squares, that was excellent. We also really liked when you actually speak around the healthcare, and it is so true that the regional healthcare is always an area that consider is a bit of gaps that need a lot of support for the governments. So that was pretty good in terms of the implementation ideas. What we like to see more of your presentation would be the actual program management aspect. So we see that there's slides around how you see the investment will go. You acknowledge that will be the $1 billion from the government, but also ability to attract the 5 billion. We're really keen to see more details around that studies. So I think that's something that maybe we can in the future to actually provide the substantiations. So that's the program management conditions. And the other thing is around the industry, the relevancy. Again, we thought that you could actually build on that a little bit more in your presentations. Overall, I think it's a good presentation. Thanks for that.
Thank you for the feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, and now back to Andy for Team Evergrande.
So who was that? Was that me as well, Avi?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, sorry. Derek, are you able to talk about Team Evergrande? Sorry, I'm just not able to get this up at the moment.
Yep, just grabbing my notes. I guess a few things that we did like, highlights from the presentation. I thought that the analysis that the team did from a costings and finance side was really, really good. It was clear that a lot of work had gone into that analysis. Likewise, the research that had gone into the technology around the solar energy and the solar panels was really, really good. So it was clear that once you grabbed your idea, that you really dove deep into it and got a lot of good data, and then did a lot of really good analysis on it. So that was absolutely fantastic. It was probably some of the best analysis that we saw. On areas that you could have worked on, and we touched on this earlier on, it was sort of answering that initial question, which was, what's the investment? So it was clear where the investment was coming from, and it was the play was this solar power and this solar energy, and that was where the big impetus was from. What wasn't clear and what wasn't analysed as well was where that 5 billion was coming from. It was not clear that there was a path from the initial investment in the solar power and the initial investment in the cultural activities to then show $5 billion return of investment from the private sector. That it wasn't there. So that was probably the area that needed some further work on. I think back to you, Avi.
Yeah, so I guess that's all the feedback that we wanted to provide to all the teams. Now, I guess, do you want to pull up your slides again, Jen?
Yeah.
The ones that you
Sure
prepared.
thing.
Yeah. So I guess we'll be announcing the winners and the runner-ups.
Yes.
Not the runner-up, sorry, for the event so far. Before we do so, I just wanted to let you guys know that yes, I will be providing some feedback, like as individual feedback for each team on paper, just so that you can work on it, and it will really help you with getting to assessment centers at at different companies you apply to. Now for the second prize, which was the $500 plus the career development package, we'd like to award this prize to, just bring it up, ECC Consulting. Congratulations, guys. You guys all did a very fantastic job. Let's give them a round of applause and unmute ourselves and not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All good. All good. Yeah, you guys did a very fantastic job. We really like the ideas, and of course, please look back on the feedback that the judges have given you. I guess it makes quite sense why you received the prize. Let's go into the first prize winners. So I'd like to do a drum roll, but I don't think it's feasible here. So let's just announce the winners. So the winners of the E3 advisory and CEVSOC case competition are Bumble Bee 3 advisory. Let's give them a round of applause.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yeah, you guys did a great job. So you guys are the winners of $2,000 plus second round interviews at E3. So of course we'll get in touch with both of the teams, ECC and Bumble Bee 3, as well as CEVSOC, to let you know how we're going to coordinate these prizes. As for the other teams, you guys did very well. It was quite close. The scoring was very, it was 0.1, 0.2 off of each other. There's no clear outlier. You guys did a fantastic job out here. We can understand that this competition and this case comp is quite different to what you would have received from other engineering companies that you've done case competitions for. This is a bit more, I guess, high level strategic. It sort of involves quite a bit of critical thinking, and I guess you guys did a very good job of adapting to the situation and providing something that's very meaningful and something that we could actually consider within our own work. So thanks for that. We'll pass it back over to you, Jen.
Yeah, so congratulations to ECC Consulting and Bumble Bee 3 Advisory. And well done to all the teams today, and great job on making it this far. So I would like to thank E3 Advisory for sponsoring and coordinating this case competition. And so in particular, a shout out to Abhishek from E3 and also Annie. So I'd also like to thank our judging panelists, so Michael, Stina, Derek, and Andy, for their time today. So this concludes our final presentation event. We hope you enjoyed the final presentations for the E3 and CEVSOC case competition. And thank you all for coming, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And for all the prize winners, can you also please stay back after this event? Yeah, you're welcome to leave.
Thanks, CEVSOC. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.